All right, Mark, how are you today? Back for another chat. We've gone weekly. We've skipped the fortnightly chat, obviously, because Christmas is going to get in the middle. So we're going to have a chat today, and probably the last one until 2025, considering that the holiday season kicks in, kids are on holidays, and all of those things. So we'll put out a chat, and hopefully we can share some valuable information, and not only talk about beer, which some people have criticised over the last week or so. Our beer conversation. So we're not going to talk about beer today. Let's talk about your Christmas lottery ticket that you have bought.
Well, obviously, I'm surprised this could actually obviously be our last ever chat because I'm obviously going to win the lottery. Because
That
I
is
think
true.
it's
That is true, because the odds are stacked in your favour, right?
well, you know, I did some research after your bitterness towards the lottery, and I believe the Euro Millions is like 140 million to one to win the jackpot.
Euro
But
Millions, Euro Millions, 140 million to one. All right, there we go.
yeah, but the drum roll, the Spanish lottery, 100,000 to one to win the jackpot.
Spanish, 100,000 to one. Well, that's actually, that's not too bad. That's probably, if you look at that, what's the population of Spain? 48 million. So we can imagine that everyone here is going to have a ticket. So there's a good chance of winning the big prize, or just getting something
That's
back.
the big prize. I mean, put that into perspective. If you wanted to guess my telephone number and you guessed the last 5 digits correctly, that's 100,000 to one. Or if you did heads or tails, I think if you got 17 heads or tails in a row, that's 100,000 to one.
Yeah. All right. Good. So
But I'm hopeful, mate. I'm hopeful. I'm gonna win it because I've been here to win it.
well, that's it. That's it. You have to be confident, and you always have to remember that if you don't have a ticket and your neighborhood or your friends or your I don't know, your work colleagues, not your case anymore, but if your kid's school wins it, everyone's going to be cracking those champagne bottles open except you, right?
Well, my wife's gone out and bought some cava this morning just in case. Well, not just in case, for when we do eventually win the jackpot on
Cava.
on cava. Yeah.
All right, good. Yes, the Spanish equivalent of champagne, as we know. Yeah, so
So
the
we're going to
lottery.
talk about today. Then what are we going to talk about today? What's
Well,
happening?
I was thinking that we could talk today about cost of living here in Spain. I
Yeah,
want to also talk about education, because I know you've got, I think you said you got two kids, right?
yeah, 15 and 17.
Both at school.
hmm
So we'll talk about education, but I think we'll start off talking about the cost of living. Now, there's been a few videos going around on the internet. How much do you need to live in Spain nowadays? Obviously, the cost of living isn't what it was when you first came 22 years ago. You know, probably you were looking at a relatively cheap place back then, even though the euro had kicked in. And I think we mentioned this, that there was an inflation surge when that peseta disappeared and the euro kicked in. People did what they call here the redondeo, which is round up, and the peseta had a pretty tricky exchange, because it was 166.386 pesetas. So what everybody did was they just rounded up 100%, 100. Sorry, there's something coming up on the screen there. Yeah. Well, did they go to 200, or did they just round it up? Like €1 became like what 100 pesetas was before, right? So there was, on some things, there would have been like a 66% increase, right?
Well, as I said in previous videos, I mean, I arrived just after it came in, but people keep complaining so much, like simple things like a cup of coffee and things like that. I agree with you. The cost of living is a big issue here at the moment, as it is everywhere. So we've talked about it before off camera and on camera. When we talk to various people around the world, it seems to be the same things they complain about, and cost of living is always one.
Absolutely, yeah. Cost of living is the big challenge that we have nowadays. So what have you seen go up in price over here? Property would have gone up in price, your day-to-day. I'm not just talking about the inflationary pressure that we've been under for the last 4 years since COVID. I'm even talking about over that period. Property's gone up, rents have gone up. How much money do you need to live comfortably, do you think, where you are in the south of Spain? Because I've seen, as I said, videos on the internet saying that with 2,000 euros a month for a couple, they've got that's what they need. Other people are saying you need more. Some people are saying you need less. I mean, what's the figure nowadays to live comfortably in Spain? 2,500, 3 a month?
I would say, I mean, it depends on the person's circumstance. Obviously, kids make that equation very different. I would say you could, if a couple here would live a pretty comfortable life for 2,500, 3,000 euros a month. Well, once again, depends on their mortgage, depends on their rent. I mean, mortgages, like everywhere in the world, went up with interest rates. Rents, as you've touched upon many times on your channel, are now probably double what they were maybe pre-COVID. One thing I did notice, which did surprise me, when I was back in the UK a couple of weeks back, I filled my car up, the renter car up at the airport. And I was surprised how cheap the petrol was. I mean, obviously not as cheap as here, but it was only like 6 or 10 cents difference in a litre. Obviously, the exchange rate isn't what it was, but when I first came here, it was almost half the price of the UK. The supermarket generally tends to be 20 or 30% more expensive, but once again, depends on what you're buying. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that it's. I mean, it's all going to depend on what your lifestyle is, but at the end of the day, Spain, as people have mentioned in the comment section, it's even difficult, apart from the menú del día, to get a cheap meal nowadays. A lot of the restaurant prices have gone up. There was I don't want to bring this towards alcohol again, but there was an article in the paper the other day that bars are charging up to 14 euros for a gin and tonic nowadays. And they're saying that that's just ludicrous, considering the price of a wholesale price of a bottle of gin, right? So charging 14 euros for a copa, as they call it here, is just basically ripping people off. So are we getting caught up in something here where we are, I don't know, perhaps paying too much for things?
I think so, but there's a lot of we talked about in the last the video. I mean, about the economy and things like that. And the economy perceived to be doing better. But as I said, my business, before I left it, was 10, 15% up on the previous year. But the actual what I was making was less. So wages have gone up and things like that, but not in relation to how things have gone up in general. I mean, bars and restaurants are forced to put their prices up. The menu del día is, as you've covered on your channel before, has steadily crept up in price. I mean, but still, I went for breakfast this morning. I had almost a pint of natural orange juice with tomato toast and some avocado and a nice coffee, and that only cost me €7. But probably 3 or 4 years ago, that would have cost me 5.
Yeah, okay, good.
So
yeah.
I would say in general, things have probably gone up 20%. But as overheads go up, people are forced to put prices up.
Yeah. The government's talking about bringing the working week down to 4 days a week. You're probably aware of this. Yeah. How would that? I mean, one of the big problems with the Spanish economy, Mark, has always been productivity, according to the experts. I mean, I've never worked in a Spanish company. I've only ever gone in as an English teacher and seen what's going on. So I've never really understood that side of it. But that's what a lot of experts say. They say productivity in Spain is low. Does shortening the working week as an ex-employer, if all of a sudden your employees are coming to you and saying, hey, hang on, we only have to work 37.5 hours a week now instead of 40. How would you take that as an employer? Do you think that's beneficial, or is it going to go against those productivity targets?
It's a very interesting debate, that, because I think it depends a lot on the sector. I mean, in my sector, which was the bar, restaurant, hospitality sector, there was always shortages. There's been shortages since COVID. So if you're going to cut people's hours down, businesses will probably either cut the opening hours, which will once again affect the economy, and there's no staff to fill these gaps. Pre-COVID, I had 5-6 staff, and I had them all on, I think it was 38-hour contracts, and they all had 3 days off, right? So, and they all loved that. That's what they wanted, and I'd say their productivity was better from that because they were happier. If that works now, because the world is a very different place to how it was 5 years ago, I don't know. It's a very interesting debate, that, but I find it quite silly that the government are looking at reducing hours. Obviously, people get paid the same amount of money. But what they should be looking at is still the problems here with the black economy. I mean, so many people get paid in cash. So many people get abused with their contracts. It's especially in my sector or my ex sector. It's just almost par for the course that you're going to get abused.
Well, the black economy, I think we've touched on it a couple of times. I mean, it still exists. There's stories you hear all the time of, even serious companies, and I think did you mention one maybe last week or the week before of or maybe it was somebody else. I can't remember who mentioned it, but serious companies that are paying part of a person's salary in cash because they don't want to be paying the full social security contributions to the state, which are quite heavy. And the Spanish government's also going on about record tax revenues and all of these things. They're breaking records all over the place. So there are a lot of changes that are being pushed through. But again, when it comes to reducing the working week, some people are obviously skeptical, especially the business lobbies. And there's always been that clash between the unions and the business lobbies as to the way the labour market should work. But it's still very strict. And one of the reasons for the black economy is because of the rigidity in the labour market, I think, right?
I agree with that. I mean, I was always, when I first came here, of course, I was aware there was a black economy in Spain, but I would honestly say it's probably 1,000 times worse than I thought it was when I arrived here.
1,000 times worse.
Yeah, I couldn't believe how prevalent it was everywhere, from the little kiosk on the beach to the royal family until the head of government in some cases. It's just shocking. It's almost a terrible thing to say, but it's almost part of the culture. It's awful. A Spanish person only said to me about a year ago, he says, corruption or the black economy isn't news. When there's no black economy, there's no corruption. That's when it's news. Because there's always going to be corruption. There's always going to be a black economy. As I said, speaking from my own experience, I tried to look after my staff as best I could, give them sometimes 3 days off, 2.5 days off, making sure they had weekends off, especially in my sector. And I got a good response from that, and they tended to do their job very, very well. A lot of people criticize the local workers here and say, they're all lazy. But a lot of the time, because the conditions are so bad, they're just not motivated. Well, it's about motivation.
Yeah, I've come to that conclusion as well, because when you get to know people, you walk into an average restaurant, talk about restaurants, talk about any type of shop, any type of service industry job. Sometimes you get the impression that the people aren't interested in serving you at all. It's difficult sometimes to get a waiter's attention. Sometimes the person behind the bar's on their phone. Yeah. They're not, there's another example. The other day I saw a British YouTuber, a food guy in Benidorm, walks into a restaurant in Benidorm. The first thing the person behind the counter did was run to get away from the camera. Now we're talking about a guy that can bring huge amount of business to your bar or restaurant through this one video, and the person behind the counter runs off and somebody else. It just doesn't make sense, because this person obviously doesn't feel that he has the responsibility to the business in any way, shape or form, I imagine.
Unless he didn't have a contract and didn't want to be caught on.
That could be the other reason, right?
But I'm still shocked by the amount of people here who work cash. I mean, people tend to, they're almost like a lot of people at the moment, they will take their unemployment like they do over the winter months, but then they will do a cash job at the weekends, and it seems like almost once again like completely normal to them.
Yeah.
And there's no form of labour inspections, even though that I believe that is getting better. I mean, my accountant or head store used to always say to me, "You're not getting labour inspections because you're doing everything basically right." But even to do everything right, I mean, it's so complicated, the labour laws here. So I don't know. I'm a firm believer in, if you treat people right, make sure they have their paid holidays, make sure they have a time to sit down and have something to eat away from the workplace, and give them days off. They will respond. These people in these chiringuitos, these beach bars, who basically start in June and then don't finish until the middle of September, no days off, 7 days a week, and of course they're getting some extra money in their hand, but they're absolutely knackered. You see them and you go in there and you understand why the service is so bad, because they're working these long days and long trousers by the beach. Sometimes that must be 40 or 50 degrees in the sun. Yeah. I mean, it's brutal. I mean, I wouldn't wish that on my worst enemy, but people want that here because they know they just have to do that for 3 or 4 months sometimes, and then they can take the rest of the year off.
Well, that shouldn't be that way in theory, right? It doesn't. I mean, that there's just no. You get the impression that people are not willing to do a decent day's work if you were just willing to work a couple of hard days in summer and then take the rest of the year off, if you can do that. I mean, it just doesn't really make sense, right? But I can understand. See, this whole chiringuito, there was an article in the paper the other day, don't know whether you saw it, but the European Union is cracking down on the way that these licenses are handed out to the these chiringuitos. Apparently, there's a lot of maybe lack of transparency. Sounds strange, here in Spain, that there's a lack of transparency, given the fact that the king was walking around doing what he was doing without anybody really knowing for 30 years, right? And
Yeah.
and now with the current government scandal of all of these kickbacks and commissions that all of these ministers are being brought in, so you get the idea that transparency isn't an issue here in Spain. I say ironically, but part of the problem is this: that a lot of these contracts are handed out, and a lot of these beach bars are in places that it must be the local councils that control them. Is it? Do you know?
Well, I mean, this is kind of like the fairy tale of how it works here. These beach bars originally were, I imagine, little kiosks or little things on the beach, and eventually they probably built a little terrace and expanded. Obviously, a very different time 30, 40 years ago to what it is now. I don't know what it was. It was probably around about 2010 or 2012 or something like that. They were told by the central government all the beach bars had to be ripped down because they were illegally built, because they were built so close to the sea.
Yeah, because that coastal law, I think, probably kicked in, right?
There's something like it's the first 10 meters or something like that from the sea. I don't know exactly what that is. But they were told they had to rip them down. But the Junta de Andalucía basically turned to central government and said, if you want to rip them down, you come and tell them, because this is part of our culture. Which it is. I think the chiringuitos or the beach bars here are very important to the culture. So they came to some arrangement where they're paying some sort of ground rent now. They pay a small fee, and they have to do a complete refit every 25 years or 30 years. So a lot of the ones here in Fongarola have all gone over facelifts, and they all look amazing. But once again, they're out. The prices have gone up, and they've kind of they're too expensive for the locals now. So people come down from Córdoba or Sevilla in the summer, and they can't afford to go to these chiringuitos because they're so expensive.
No, they bring their cool box, or esky as we call them in Australia, down with their watermelons and their bocadillos and their cans of beer, and they sit on the beach for 10 or 11 hours, tanning themselves and having a great old time. But the chiringuitos, it's interesting you mentioned that, because some of the top chefs in the country have gone into, especially I think in Cádiz, there's some really, probably where you are as well, there's some really fancy chiringuitos now. The word chiringuito, if anybody doesn't know, it's a beach bar, but not a beach bar that you would imagine in Australia, for example, but a beach bar, as you said, which can be literally 5 meters from the water in some cases, right?
But it's interesting, because when we first came here, they were a little bit spit and sawdust. I mean, they were plastic chairs, paper tablecloths. It was that
was the original idea, wasn't it?
Yeah, but now I mean, it started. I obviously started probably when they had to do the reformers or the facelifts, and now they look a lot better. They look a lot nicer. They use proper tablecloths. The presentation is better. The food is better. I mean, the food culture here is amazing in Spain, clearly. But the chiringuitos have upped their game. But once again, they've probably outpriced a large percentage of the market. Maybe they don't want those people, I don't know. I mean, there's a chiringuito right next to where my bar was, which was horrendous. I mean, terrible place.
What, the food or?
Just food, service. It looked like a rundown shack. And then, because it was so close to the sea, it got semi-destroyed during one of the storms.
Yeah.
They obviously got the insurance money, and they give it a complete refit. And it was bought by a group of investors from Madrid, including the Real Madrid footballer. And now it's amazing. It looks like so smart. The service is amazing. All the plates are served differently. It's just so different to what it was before.
Well, it's interesting that even something like that would be able to get insurance in the first place, considering its location, right? I mean, storms are coming through all the time, and we saw after that recent one, some of the images of the beaches down there, which were just full of sticks and whatever else had come down from the mountains onto the coast. And if you've got your little chiringuito on the beach which is getting destroyed, or you're having to redo, I'm sure the insurance companies would be putting the premiums quite high.
You would think so. It's interesting. You showed that. I remember you showed that picture of the beach covered in the bamboo sticks, and I literally taken a picture that morning to send you of exactly the same thing here in Fongarola. But I mean, it washes out to sea, then washes back in again. Some of these beach bars are close, so when the sea does get rough, which doesn't happen that often because we are in the Med, it can go right up to their back doors, and it has at times just destroyed them. But I mean, they shouldn't be built there in the first place. I always felt sorry for. I mean, you remember probably at the beginning of the noughties and the beginning of the 2010s that these people who were losing their houses in land because they were built illegally, despite them having proper licenses from the town hall. And I thought, well, hold on, so you're making them rip down their houses, but the chiringuitos get you give them a kind of like a way out. Surely common sense has to prevail in both cases.
Well, again, it probably comes back to what you mentioned before, such a part of the culture that, when you go to a beach in Andalusia, because I'll say Andalusia because if you go to the north of Spain, there's no, the whole concept doesn't exist. Yeah, there are bars close to the beach, but they're normally away from the actual sand. But here we're talking about beaches that are on the beach. Yeah,
I mean, you got the ones closest to me. I mean, you walk out the back of the beach bar Chiringuito, and there's sunbeds there. So you could probably throw an orange over your shoulder and hit the bar. It's that close. I mean, they are lovely places to spend a day and sit there, especially after the summer months, say end of September, beginning of October. It's nothing better than having lunch on the Chiringuito. Mm-hmm. It's the beautiful, the sun hitting the sea, and
absolutely,
the temperature's lovely. It's lovely.
That's the selling point, I suppose, right? I mean, even if you go to Benidorm, I think as far as I know that there's no such thing. All of the bars at Benidorm and that Mediterranean coast around Valencia, Alicante, they're all back, separated by a road. I think the majority of places. I could be wrong, but at least that's the memory that I have. So it's a thing that's unique to Cadiz, to Malaga, to Almeria, Granada. And they obviously want to keep it because it is, as you said, when you come out of that warm Mediterranean Sea in the middle of summer, the first thing you want to do is get a cold beer or a cold drink into you, and you don't want to have to walk too far. And that's the idea. That's the idea. Now we'll move the conversation on. We'll talk a little bit about education. You've got a couple of kids in school, I think, Mark. You said 15 and 17.
Yep.
I think you mentioned private school, or is it one of these concertados?
I mean, it sounds awful that I'm here not working with my kids at private school, but the private schools here are quite affordable compared to what you were paying. I couldn't afford to put them in the private school in the UK.
No.
And we made a conscious decision when we put them into the educational system that we don't have many high overheads. Let's give our kids the best education they can have. And I was quite critical of the school when it first started, especially with the form of learning there. It's very much parrot fashion and exams. But to be fair, I've noticed a big change in the educational system here over the last 5 or 6 years, and it seems to be getting better. The kids now are speaking a lot better English, which is probably not news to you because you want to have more students. But it's definitely improving. It's improving. But both my daughters want to study back in the UK. They want to flee the nest. Yeah. But here in Malaga, people tend to want to study closer to home. To me, the university experience is moving away from home, getting the university life as well as the education. But here they generally want to study locally, be it a private university or a state-run one. But the education here, I'm not saying the public schools is particularly bad, because I think it depends on the public school and the area you're in. But in general, I'd say that is improving. Definitely improving.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I had this. I've only got one boy. He's 14, going on 15 next year. Going through the school system. He's in what they call the concertado, which is like a private school that's funded by the state. It's a difficult concept for people to get their head around. So you've got your public schools, you've got your concertados, which are the ones that I just mentioned. Then you've got your fully private schools that don't receive any money from the government, I don't think. Sorry, you're going to say something? Yeah,
with it, I think the part private, part state run, isn't that dependent on where you live? If you're in a certain postcode, you're allowed to put your kid into that school. Because we have it here. There's one like that, and the parents almost like, using their grandparents' houses as a place where they say they live just to get the kid into that school.
Yeah, I think technically that is the case. You have to live quite close to one of these schools, but a lot of people have ways of getting around that, which is they have a relative who lives close to the school, so you do the padrón at your auntie's house or your or your grandparents' house or whoever, in order to get your kids into the school. I mean, that happens here as well. But I think at the end of the day, because the schooling, I think the schooling's in the hands of the autonomous communities, right? So Andalusia is in charge of the education system down there. So there might be small changes, but it's definitely the case. I mean, there's one of these concertado, partly private schools here as well, which is on the other side from where I live, and kids from my neighborhood here go to that school. I said, how did you get in there? Oh, yeah, my auntie lives on that side of the town, so we went to the council, registered at her house, and got our kids into the school, and then quickly shifted back. So, I mean, people are doing this all of the time, but that's just common nature, I think, right? To try and get your kids, because a lot of people, when they see the word public school or state school, it's like they just go crazy and they want to put their kids into any other type of education. So education's very polarized. I didn't catch it. Did you say your kids are on the Spanish curriculum or the British?
They're on Spanish curriculum. It's a Spanish school. It's a Catholic school. So they got all that kind of like it's very traditional. I say traditional conservative school. But I would say it's a decent one. They have to work hard, and they get good grades there, and they get into good universities. Most of the kids there. I think the school. How do you say it? The half state, half
concertado.
I would say that one in our town is one called El Coto. It seems to be one of the better schools, if not the best school in the town. You still get private schools up the coast. There's a German private school and there's a British one, which are more expensive than one we pay for here.
Yeah.
But I would definitely say the educational system is so much better here. But they do depends on where you are. So I imagine Galicia has a very different subjects matters to Andalusia. I presume certain things are universal.
I think one of the big problems with the part of Spain that you just mentioned there was that they have that second language issue, which you're not going to have in Andalusia, right? So if you're in one of these parts of Spain that are bilingual, so Galicia, Basque Country, Catalonia, I think Valencia works this way as well, that they do have that second language. So a lot of the education is going to be in that language. So if you're in Catalonia going to a state school, maybe 80% of your education is going to be in Catalan, right?
Yeah.
Which is fantastic if you're born and bred in Catalonia, but somebody like yourself, if your wife said to you, look, there's a job opportunity in Catalonia, let's go there, your kids would go into a public school in Catalonia with a disadvantage because they don't speak the Catalan language, right? So you have to put them into a private school, yes, basically, as they say, C or C here in Spain. And I think that happens maybe in Galicia as well, Basque Country, as I said. So the education system, because it is controlled by the autonomous communities, you can have those type of issues. But in Andalusia, obviously, no, because there's only one language.
But you've got languages. I mean, obviously the language debate and people's identity is a big thing across the world. I mean, obviously you've got Irish, which is a big debate at the moment in Ireland. I think over the last 10 years that's been brought back into schools, Welsh schools. But here you have different languages. I think in Mallorca, there's a dialect, a close to a language in Leon. You know, I mean, the Canary Islands, I believe there's also a local kind of language or dialogue there. I don't know much about that. So
I don't think it affects the education system, and I don't think in Leon it affects the education system. I think it becomes an optional subject, right? So I know that in Asturias, for example, they have a language called Bable, which basically nobody speaks. But in Asturias, if you want to study that language, it's an optional subject, right? So, but I think Spanish, Castellano Spanish, as they call it, Castilian Spanish. Whereas if you go to your Catalonia, for example, Castilian Spanish, in some parts of Catalonia, you might not get any education at all or very limited. And that's something that the Spanish state has trouble guaranteeing that. So technically there's freedom of movement. You can move anywhere in the country, wherever you want to. But if you go to the Basque Country, you might not be able to get a state education because your kids don't speak Basque.
You think I think the three recognised languages apart from obviously Spanish is the Galicia, the Basque Country, and the Catalan. I don't think the Valencian language is considered official yet. Is it or not?
No, but in Valencia, it is. I think it's a co-language because when you go to the Valencian area, all of the signs are in the Valencian language as well, right? So in Mallorca, Mallorquin, although it's not recognised by the Spanish Constitution at that local level, I think it is recognised.
Well, we were watching the news. There was something about Mallorca today, and the woman was speaking that language on the news.
It's like Catalan, I think.
But you think that the way the world is going, these people are worried about these dialects or these languages dying out. So maybe it will be pushed towards the educational systems, which is fine in principle, but all it does, as you said before, makes it more problematic when you're moving around.
Well, that's it. I mean, in Australia, we don't have to worry about this because there's only one language technically, right? So you can go anywhere and be guaranteed an education in your language.
Yeah.
But probably in the UK, as you mentioned there, if you suddenly get transferred to Cardiff in Wales in the state school system, are they going to be teaching Welsh? I don't know. Maybe.
I'm sure someone will put it in the comment section about
Sure.
that. I know the Welsh language is growing, and I think it's important that these languages don't die out. And a lot of people do speak that, but I'm not sure if it's compulsory in schools or not.
Well, again, I don't know, but here I think it is. Here I think it is. And the Welsh language, I don't know much about it, except that I've seen some words that have like 40 letters in it. So it must be difficult to get your tongue around.
Well, it's the longest village name in the whole of Europe, or maybe the world, isn't it? And it's like, if you can learn that, it's quite a good party piece, I think.
That's it. Now, we're on a bit of a tight schedule today, so I just wanted to talk about something you mentioned before. You had trouble getting workers. Now, we all know the solution to Spain's woes when it comes to the pension system and making it sustainable is to bring in millions of people. I think the last figure I heard was 24 million people. And the comment section on my YouTube channel, whenever I talk about this, there's lots of people saying Spain this, Spain that, immigration, no, blah, blah, blah. And some people leaving comments the other day saying that neighborhoods are going to the dogs because of the demographics in those neighborhoods. The fact of the matter is that, and I'm sure you came across this, that in a lot of sectors here, Spanish people don't want to work. So the only way that you're going to get people to go into these jobs is to get people from outside, right? So hospitality, South Americans in general, because they speak the language, they're not there saying, "Oh, sorry, did you order a coffee?" Or so they don't have the problem. They hit the ground running, able to speak the languages, go into these sectors. Lots of people coming in from the east of Europe, or have done over the time. Also, the language skills are picked up fairly quickly. They go into a lot of service jobs as well, Romania, etc. But the big question now is, where are these 24, 25 million people going to come from? There's government agreements with African countries now. That's the big plan of the government, to bring these people in. So do you see this as a sustainable model from an ex-business owner point of view, that your labour shortages would be solved by so many people coming in? Or if somebody does come in from, let's say, a non-speaking Spanish background, how long is it going to take them realistically to be able to fully operate in the labour market, Mark? What do you reckon?
God, that's a can of worms we've opened there, isn't it? I mean, I used to have predominantly Spanish workers pre-COVID. After COVID, it changed into more South Americans, a lot of Argentinians. I believe there's a lot of Moroccans here at the moment, close to 1 million Moroccans in Spain, and they generally speak the language. Romanians, obviously, there's a lot of them as well, but I think that's a Romance language as well, so it's not too difficult for them to speak Spanish. As to fixing the problem itself, I think it sounds controversial. I think there's just too many state workers here and too many state jobs. I think if you cut them, people would be forced into different industries, and then it would probably solve a lot of the job shortages in those sectors. I find it strange here that they don't do something for the businesses like hotels or bars or restaurants through the winter by maybe halving their social security contributions to keep people employed. I think that would be a better thing, because people just tend to shut up because it's too expensive to run them. Whereas if you gave people incentives to remain open, maybe they would remain open. Where the extra labour forces are going to, as long as the people are speaking the language. I mean, once again, you've got the debate about the fruit pickers up in Almeria and areas like that. Where do they come from? I think they're predominantly African or Northern African, aren't they? Or Romanian as well. It's a difficult one. It all depends on the sector and all depends on the area.
Well, yeah, I think to pick fruit, probably you could get by with very minimal language skills, but as soon as you start going into any part of the economy, right, you're going to have to pick up on the language skills. So I mean, it's a huge debate. It's going to be interesting to see how they sort it out, because as we get closer to retirement age, Mark, these are something that you start to worry about these things, right? Whether you're going to have a sustainable pension in the future. And
But
all of these things.
they just put the pensions up again, haven't they? So I don't understand.
Well, they go up every year according to the CPI, don't they?
Oh, really? I didn't know that. So I believe they go up to close to 3%, but didn't they get a big whopping increase last year?
Yeah, because inflation was over 10% or something, so they gave pensioners got a 10% increase according to the CPI.
I mean, I wish that. Obviously, it's important to look after pensioners and things like that. But call me cynical, but that seems to be the government looking after voters rather than looking after young people who tend to not to vote. But the youth unemployment here is a big problem. I mean, Spain, I think it was up close to 12% a couple of months ago, but I think my daughter mentioned it was up to close to 14 now, which has to be one of the highest unemployment rates in Europe, I think.
Is that something? Sorry, just to interrupt. Is that something that your kids have spoken about? Is that one of the reasons why they want to go to the UK to finish off their education, because of that high youth unemployment?
Well, they see that and they talk about it, and it's interesting because especially my oldest daughter, who's now 17, they debate it and they talk about wages across Europe and how much doctors get paid here compared to Germany and places like that, and people do want to have hope with their job prospects, and I think that they both feel like they want to work in the UK because they feel there would be more opportunity open to them. I mean, well, depends on what sector they go into, but they don't want to limit themselves to here. And they want to, I said they want an adventure, they want to go somewhere else, they want an experience, they will learn from those experiences, and maybe they'll come back here. And as long as they're happy, I'm happy. But I sometimes I pity the workers here because there isn't much hope. It's almost like they get a job and they're happy with that job, but there isn't much of a kind of like promotional culture here that the harder you work, the more you earn. It's just like, oh, I've got a job and that's that.
Unless you're in the, I suppose, working for one of the big companies where you do have those promotional options here, and they're almost impossible to get into unless you've got the exact skills, or or as they say, you know somebody who knows somebody, right?
Yeah, I mean, I've always been a big believer in my bar. The 22 years I had it, I'd always employ people and promote someone in. So if someone was a good worker, they'd become like the assistant manager, or give them the key, introduce them how to do the stock or the orders, or how to do the cash up and things like that. And eventually they'd become the manager. But that was very rare here. People, especially once again back to the chiringuitos, they just employ family. So if you're a worker, you don't. It's like, I'm just basically going to be a waiter, aren't I? That's it.
Yeah, well, that's it. You never get any opportunity of going up if the boss's kids are in the way, right?
Well, it's interesting when the sectors you're told what you have to pay people, which I'm a big believer in fair pay and things like that and workers' rights. But there's no incentive there. So when you brought someone in, say in the UK, back when I was back there many years ago, you say, right, I'm going to pay you £8 an hour. But in 3 months, we can look at that again. And if you've done a good job, maybe we can look at paying you a bit more. And then they have an incentive then to work, knowing in 3 months' time they could be getting $8.50.
Well, I think the idea is to feel part of the business, even if you're not the boss, to feel, that you're working for the business, and everybody comes out a winner if the business is successful and everybody works hard, and your boss is showing that appreciation, right? Which seems to make sense.
But it seems to be almost like a weakness showing people. It sounds awful again, but it's in the latter part, once again, since COVID, the better I was with the staff, the more I seem to suffer for it, especially in Spanish, you give them the hand and they take the arm. And it did seem like that a lot of the time,
Well, you got to be careful with that, absolutely. Now, we'll wrap it up because I know you got to be somewhere soon, so we've been going for a while today.
All right, mate, you have a lovely Christmas and a new year. I might speak to you 2025.
Will do. All the best. See you later.
You do, mate.
Bye-bye.